Time again for another installment of the basics, and on today's show I'm moving back to the Star Trek CCG once again because I've had some questions from viewers about how I choose missions when I'm building a deck. And I'm going to use my Federation deck and my Ferengi deck to give you an example of what I do when I'm putting them together. Now, you've heard me say before on this show that after choosing an affiliation to start building a deck, missions and personnel go hand in hand. You have to carefully choose your missions as you're putting your personnel in your deck according to the affiliation you've chosen. Now, when it comes to my Federation deck, this is more cut and dry than the rest of the decks I have put together, mainly because I have a lot of main characters and personnel in my Federation deck, so I've chosen my missions according to the personnel I will have on the 2 or 3 ships in the deck and how easily they can complete these missions once they get past the dilemmas. My missions are very Federation centric. As you can see, 4 out of the 6 missions, 1, 2, 3, 4, are strictly Federation missions, the other 2 being tri-affiliation. I've chosen these because of the crew I have in my deck. So for example, repair mission, engineer times 3 plus computer skill, I can knock that off with 2 personnel. Diplomacy plus empathy, 2 personnel. Engineer times 3, navigation, computer skill, and physics, also 2 personnel, sometimes 3. And the rest of them take about 3 personnel, as well as some legacy personnel. I've done that purposely because I want to be able to complete the mission very quickly after I've dealt with the dilemmas, and these help me to do that. Now, moving to my Ferengi deck, this is a mixed bag because my Ferengi deck is not as cut and dry. I do utilize non-aligned personnel in this deck. It's one of my few decks where I do that. And as you can see, I don't have any Ferengi-centric missions. I have 3 missions with the Ferengi icon that can be attempted by other affiliations, but I also have 3 missions that any crew may attempt because they fit in perfectly with the nature of this deck. And of course I mean the abundance of non-aligned personnel in addition to the Ferengi. For example, in the any crew may attempt mission decks, navigation plus physics plus engineer plus a universal ship. I have that spread out between the personnel in the deck. Espionage mission, this is an interesting one, but can be easy to attempt. The main thing with this deck is FCA times 2. One of my personnel has that classification. If I can beam down the away team that gets rid of all of those dilemmas, I only need the 1 personnel in the away team to pass that mission. Feldamite Rush is another any away team may attempt. Geology plus greed plus either treachery times 3 or law. In a mainly Ferengi deck with some non-aligned, very easy mission to undertake, I have the personnel. And of course, the what I call branded missions that have the Ferengi icons, these are multiple personnel missions, especially the ones I have to beam down to, but not that hard to pass, providing, of course, the dilemmas under the mission. As you can see, and I've said this before, my missions are tailored to that deck. I didn't just grab a bunch of random missions and throw them in there. This goes back to hand in hand with personnel. If I showed you my other decks, especially if I showed you my Klingon deck, you'll kind of wonder how I put the missions together for that, because you'd think I went with a lot of Klingon-centric missions, but I switched that one up too. That's a third way of doing it that I don't have time to show you on today's show. Hopefully, this gives you a good idea of what to do when building your completely different decks. That being all said, as an addendum to that, you also have to take into consideration of where this deck is being played. Are you playing it with friends and family using house rules, or are you going to a tournament or playing it with friends using full tournament gameplay rules? Because that might also influence the type of missions you put into the deck, because you also have to take into consideration that your opponent might attempt some of these missions if he's able to do so. So as you can see, there are a lot of things to weigh when you are building a deck, and more specifically inputting your missions. Be very careful with that. That's all for today. Have a great day, everybody.